What do Cyclops and Leonardo have in common? They're holier-than-thou douches and born order takers. What do they have in common with Captain America? After this movie came out, we realized, very surprisingly, not as much. For years, we always thought Captain America was a Boy Scout hero who, by today's standards, would be as archaic as the era that spawned him. Hell, in order to make him interesting, Stan Lee had to freeze him and wake him up decades later. Even then, ostensibly, he was a soldier attempting to uphold an ideal which, as time has gone on, we've become incredibly disenchanted with, especially nowadays. Cap seemed to represent that stark government propaganda that may have served a purpose back then, but is just out of place now. So, with all that in mind, what did this movie do to change everyone's perspective? Funny enough, not much. They just knew the right way to introduce us to the character to make him immediately relatable, and a lot more human than we had ever given him credit for. Right off the bat, the movie establishes that Steve Rogers doesn't want to be a soldier for the glory or even the patriotism. He's doing it because he is a man who has been underfoot virtually all his life because of the myriad of physical ailments that he's had the misfortune to have. And now a threat is coming that intends to wipe out anyone they deem inferior. For the first time, everyone is threatened alongside him. Unfortunately, he is still not being given the opportunity to do his part. Early on in the movie, he proclaims that he can't stand idly by while people are putting their lives on the line. He doesn't care that he may be physically unable to handle the task, he just knows that he doesn't like bullies. It's with that declaration that immediately we realize that not only was Steve Rogers one of us, but that the idea of us being like him isn't too far off. Here's a 100-pound shrimp from Brooklyn who just knows that you can't let your shortcomings hinder you. Before he's even injected with the serum, you see Rogers pushing himself harder than anyone in that training camp, and it's damn near inspiring. It's also important to observe the other vital component that made this character work: Chris freaking Evans. I remember when Evans got cast, the internet went into an uproar for what was, in hindsight, a pretty silly reason. Because he had already played a Marvel character when he played Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four movies. Well, Evans was definitely the best thing about those movies. Those movies were ass, so just let Evans desert the sinking ship and give him a chance to prove himself here. For me, I was only reluctant about him because at the time of his casting, he had still not totally impressed me with his skills as an actor. Fortunately, two little films came along called The Losers and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Now, Jensen and Lucas Lee aren't exactly Captain America. They were still two drastically different characters, which Evans played insanely well with considerable range, and really that's all the assurance I needed. And looking back, Evans just disappears into this role, and he brings out so much humanity in Cap that I never thought possible. While he has a substantial air of innocence about him, you still see his inner turmoil, his worry of whether or not he's able to be the hero that the world needs him to be, all the while still trying to be the man whom which Dr. Erskine put all his faith in. There are aspects of the character that many of us never really took into consideration when approaching this movie. Captain America is way more than a drone, and this movie proves it. While I have talked at length about Red Skull before, there is one thing I accidentally left out, specifically the juxtaposition between hero and villain. While the equal and opposite trope is indeed a familiar one, and it's definitely present here, it's still an essential one designed to build on both characters. There are two definitive scenes between Captain America and the Red Skull. Of course, there's the unmasking scene. Here, Red Skull maintains that he was Erskine's true success, and claims Cap's endeavors are the product of mere delusion, and that the Captain America hides in said delusion. But without missing a beat, Cap immediately calls out Skull on his bullshit by pointing out that if Red Skull is so superior, how come he's running? It beautifully points out how wrong Red Skull is about everything and how he is truly the delusional one. This is built on even more in the final act of the movie where Captain America is captured and Red Skull asks him what was it about him that inspired Erskine to give Cap everything. Cap simply grins and says, "Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn." Immediately, Red Skull loses it. This moment speaks volumes about why these are two great characters. By this point, it's made perfectly clear that Red Skull is fueled by vanity and hubris. He impulsively injects himself with the serum because he believes that he is the superior man and that only he deserves to have the power that the serum provides. Cap, on the other hand, knows that his fortune came about entirely through a combination of will, altruism, and luck. He simply desired to make it count. This is a hero dynamic that very rarely ever gets talked about when we reflect upon the MCU, and really needs to be taken into consideration when one flies off the handle claiming the villains aren't worth a damn. Now, moving forward to a side note, but sorry Tony, sorry Thor, Pepper and Jane have got nothing on Peggy Carter. Just wanted to get that out. But yeah, Peggy Carter puts all the other superhero girlfriends to shame because she is nowhere close to a superhero's girlfriend. In fact, if you ever call her that, stock up on the steak, because in all likelihood, you're walking away with a shiner. Peggy is a woman who, like Cap, had to defy the odds and the establishment to get to where she is. She had to prove that she can shoot, fight, and lead just as well as any man, and yet she does it better. You want proof? Even though Steve just got transformed, Peggy is the first one to spring into action, and in doing so, actually hinders the Hydra agents from getting away. And she was even willing to stand her ground in order to get a clean shot and risk getting run over by a car. I mean, sure, Cap saves her, but remember, she didn't ask. This woman is a class all to herself, and if you want more proof, watch her TV show. 18 episodes, all Peggy, all badass. In fact, I even recommend you watch it before you get to Winter Soldier. You'll know why. Grab the tissues. To close off, it would be a disservice if we didn't take the time to acknowledge the direction. Joe Johnston was just plain perfect for this movie. It's clear that it was his direction of the criminally underrated Rocketeer that landed him this gig. And it doesn't take a genius to see why. Johnston did a gorgeous job creating a big, splashy pulp comic adventure with humor and an old-fashioned sense of daring-do. The design of the first Avenger is incredibly stylized and makes exceptional use of sepia-tone colors. It all adds in immersing the audience into this era and makes this film feel more like a classic serial adventure, very much in the same family as Indiana Jones, and less like a superhero movie. And when you think about it, Captain America: The First Avenger was the first film in the MCU that strived to be more than what people assumed it was going to be more than just superhero movies, and be a movie that happens to feature superheroes. As these examinations move forward, I'll explain that statement in due course.